Hi, and welcome to Missed It by How Much. This is the channel that tests sports hypotheses by using computer game engines. We're currently replaying the 2013 Major League Baseball season in control of the Los Angeles Dodgers using Action PC Baseball as if it's OOTP, and we've arrived at July 6th, 2013. On this day in the real season, the Dodgers traded for Ricky Nolasco from the Miami Marlins. We're going to take a look at how that trade was reversed and if it could be changed, where would Ricky Nolasco go? What I mean by that is, when we started this season, if you remember back at the beginning, we had this spreadsheet which talked about reversing trades and how much money we would be saving on our payroll by not having that player. And one of the players was Ricky Nolasco. At first, I didn't want to reverse the trade, but then looking at how Nate Eovaldi is going to fit into our pitching staff, we didn't really need him. So I reversed that trade. It didn't really matter. The players, the minor leaguers that the Dodgers sent, would never play for this team. So I sat down and thought about this recently. What if Nolasco and Hanley Ramirez, who are both Miami Marlins, were not on the Dodgers? Where would they have gone? And would they have gone anywhere? Hanley had been traded near the trading deadline in 2012, and he was the reason Nate Eovaldi was never a Dodger except for that first season in 2012. So since we reversed that trade, that means Hanley's playing on Miami along with Nolasco. But it's possible both players, or one each, could be traded to other teams since Miami was in a rebuilding situation. So, with that as the backdrop, I took a look at where the teams are in our game on July 6th. And there are teams that can be eliminated already. I would say anything below Boston in the AL East, they're done. Even Chicago, who's barely over 500, is conceivably done. They're 7 games behind Boston, who will probably secure the wild card, if not Texas, who's at 51. Currently, they would. Anaheim's above average. They're only 5 games. It's possible Anaheim could, but with their payroll, would they really? These other teams are out. I don't think any of these teams in the NL West would make it. I guess right now Arizona would be the best option there, but they have Didi Gregorius. St. Louis has an opening at shortstop, but they're so overloaded with talent, and they're the best hitting team in the National League. You wouldn't think they would go out of their way to get Ramirez and or Ricky Nolasco. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, both fighting for that wild card. These are both teams that have holes at shortstop. Atlanta is a possibility. They have a good starting shortstop with Andrelton, but I don't think this is the type of team. They were kind of in the midst of a rebuild. I don't think they, even though they would lose Tim Hudson towards the end of this month, I don't believe they would trade either. In the real life injury to Hudson, they filled his spot with call-ups from the minor leagues. So I don't believe they would do the trade. And the Mets are under 500, so I don't think they're an option, even though they would have a hole at shortstop that needed to be filled. So let's take a look at each team's roster real quick. That is a possibility. And let's try to gauge that as to how good of a possibility is it. So we'll keep the check-in for displays all players just to get an idea of who started the games. And we'll flip this replay stats to the real stats, if we can do that. So you can get a better gauge of who really pitched how often. As you can see here, Tim Hudson had 21 starts before he got injured. He would be the replacement that Nolasco could come in, but Hudson was like, with Mike Minor and Chris Medlin, the top of that rotation. So I don't think Nolasco fits that role. He's helpful, but as you can see here, Hudson leaves on the 24th. So that's a possibility. Maybe the best possibility in terms of a pitcher. But then, see, as we look at shortstops, Simmons is the starter. And although he's a horrible offensive hitter, his fielding is top-notch. And I doubt the Braves would trade for him to replace Simmons. Now, the Marlins would not necessarily have to have a shortstop go back. They do have Hechavarria that could cover that spot, but you'd have to trade a pitcher and a good young player to fill their hole. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to pitch enough innings to satisfy the season. St. Louis is another option. They do have two average hitters. Well, I would say below average hitters at shortstop. Pete Kozma and Daniel Descalso that are, average fielders. Here he's at 0 run save. Batting, he's very poor. Even though they were the top hitting team in the National League, they could use him to replace it. It just doesn't seem like a trade that St. Louis would do. There's Descalso, slightly better. And his defense, that's probably a little bit below average of the fielding percentage. But who are they going to give up? They don't have a shortstop to give them. Somebody young like Colton Wong. He's 26. At this point, he's not really a great player. I don't think he would be favored to do a trade like that. You're not going to give anybody who's in the starting lineup. This is a very veteran team, at least at this point. And then pitching-wise, who are you going to give up? Because you're going to have to give up a pitcher for sure. Joe Kelly, who's awesome that season? I would doubt that. Michael Wacha? No. Carlos Martinez, who's off to a slow start in his career, 22. It's a possibility, but would they really do that trade? Just to get, a year and a half, a year and 2 months of Hanley Ramirez? I don't see it. If they did, that would be a huge challenge to the Dodgers and making it out. And that's one of the motivators in trying to find a home for Hanley, is that I want to make this as difficult as possible. We've already gone out to a huge 63-22 record. I want to make the playoffs difficult. These are teams that we will probably have to play. Cincinnati is a landing spot that's possible. probably the best opening that I can come up with what I think is a possible trade that would work. Matt Latos would go back to the Marlins. Zach Cozart, who's below average in offense, that could work. I kind of spitballed an idea of what a trade with the Reds and the Marlins would look like. Trying to find some common ground. And this one I had Nolasco and Ramirez going to the Reds along with Descalfia and Chad Wallach, a catcher. And Miami would get Latos, Cozart, and Tucker Barnhart. But there's a lot of years of Tucker Barnhart that I'd have to try to find a replacement for the Reds. Zach Cozart was a Red until, I want to say, 18 or perhaps later. I'd have to find a replacement there. Ramirez is only going to be with the team till 15. Descalfia and Latos actually do get traded for each other. That's the Chad Wallach component, the catchers, and Tucker Barnhart. If we look here, when that page loads, you'll see that they got traded eventually and switched to other teams. This would just be a speeding up of that process. But I don't know that the Reds would really give up Latos. They're in a very good spot right now. And he is a major part of it. Johnny Cueto is not coming back till the very end of the season, and he would pitch in the playoffs. And I think Latos would start in a playoff game versus Nolasco, who, is an average pitcher, slightly better. We scroll down on this page. We can see exactly what the trade was. Yeah, he was traded with Chad Wallach to the Reds for Latos, but that didn't happen until after the 14th season was over. So it would be speeding up the rest of 13 and all of 14 in this trade. And I just don't know that the Reds are willing to do that. Latos, who had a great start to his career, just did not. I mean, he petered out well before the ages you would think would cause that to be a problem. When his page loads, we can look at his statistics in the future. This would not end up a good trade for Miami down the line. Very immediately. In 13, he was very good, a 3.16 ERA. Even in 14, it was a decent 3.25, even though his innings were cut in half. But then after that, I mean, that's horrible. And before he hit the age of 30, he was out of the league. So, I mean, he's at 25. And he only has one good season ahead of him. That shows you how fragile a career is in baseball. So, I don't think this trade would work. And I don't think the Reds would make that trade, to be honest. They're 52 and 35. They're doing fine, trying to hold off the Pirates, who also have a situation where they could use a shortstop. And they could be going for it during Andrew McCutchen's prime. They're 49 and 37. They're only 2.5 games behind Cincinnati for the last wild card in the National League. But again, I can't pair the teams together in a good trade. When the page loads, you're going to see Jody Mercer and Clint Barnes as kind of a platoon that they run, even though Barnes plays more because he's a better defensive. He can't hit. And Mercer can hit, but it's only against lefties. So, I mean, is that worth it? I try to work on some kind of a platoon to get them there. It's not like these teams are terrible at hitting either. Pittsburgh's actually slightly better than Cincinnati, but they're both half or better in the National League, the top half of the team. Here's Barnes, who has a 558 OPS. He's horrible, but he's a 9 in range. And then you have Mercer, who's pretty good. 771's around, probably above league average. But again, most of it is concentrated on his ability to hit left-handers. Can't do the job against righties. So you're going to trade him too? Probably the trade would be Mercer. And then you lose him in the future. Pitching-wise, I mean, they have enough. Look at the ERAs of the players who are starting pitching. All in the 3s. Now you get down to here, where there's just a handful of them. Yeah, you get all over the board, including an 11.85. But I mean, how many starts is that really? And Nolasco he's not going to start that many games. He's going to be a free agent at the end. You could trade something like a Compton there. But when you just rather keep him, I mean, this is a better number than Nolasco is going to be able to provide. So I'd really like to do something now on July 6th and move them, especially since most of this month Miami has had Hanley back and it hasn't really made a difference in the standings. They have played a tougher schedule. Tampa Bay has a good starting shortstop. Boston has a good starting shortstop. Detroit loses theirs, but they trade with Boston to get Iglesias to fill in the blanks until Peralta comes back at the very end of the season into the postseason. So they don't really lose anything. I don't think they would make that trade. I don't think they need pitching. Oakland, Texas. I'm not going to do anything as of now. We're going to sit back and wait till the real deadline and see how things shake out. Boston is really falling apart due to their starting pitching and bullpen use. Looking at their pitching staff, they really could use a long reliever, but we're going with the players that they had on their roster. So as of now, I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to let it go. Perhaps there will be a deadline deal involving Nolasco or Hanley Ramirez or both to one team. But as of right now, I can't make that choice. So, just an overview there of a possible deadline deal dilemma. Maybe it'll get resolved before the end of the month. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Missed It by How Much.